Robert, I want to have a quick conversation about Ruben Amorim's midfield problem, talking about what's the future of that, and also have an interesting conversation on kind of which midfielder we can bring in. I've kind of talked about it already. I think I did my best kind of ideal midfield two at Manchester United, and that consisted of Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes. Now, on paper, I probably do think, um, I still think Manchester United, that is Manchester United's best midfield, but I want to talk about what Amorim can change to the midfield and slight tweaks that he can make to kind of improve Manchester United, because ultimately he does have a huge midfield problem, and that is not just a reaction to the Man City game. I think we've seen it so far this season. The huge problems that he has with the midfield is a concern. And listen, there is always a concern, especially when you play two in midfield. Most teams nowadays play with three or even four midfielders, and packing that space. It is a position that United have struggled with over the years. We've had players brought in who, they said Casemiro, world class player, but it was just not at his peak. Yes, he's had some good games, but again, he's just not at his peak. We've brought in players as well to kind of, well, we haven't really bought in. Casemiro's the only one as a deep line midfielder that we've really bought in over the recent years, and I think is a position that you kind of need to have set. I know Michael Carrick was at the club for, I think, from 2006 to 2018, so it does show if you get the right midfielder, they can be at the club for a while. Same with Roy Keane before, maybe not as long, but certainly had that big impact on the team. Now, look at what we need in midfield. I think we just need that all-round energetic midfield. Now, I think Holman, who someone United has been linked to, is obviously someone who played in a midfield too, but I think the main thing about it is the fact that, listen, not many players are used to playing in a two, and especially before that, Bruno was fully kind of adapted to playing in a three with a 6 and an 8 behind him, or two more defensive players than him, and he could have that free roam. And I certainly think when you put Bruno Fernandes in that midfield where he's not used to, it's out of his comfort zone, you do see a change in his performances. I think you can see he let Foden go, and it's him waving his arms around. If you watch the game and you watch Bruno, it's him waving his arms around when ultimately it's his man. And I think a few tweaks that Amorim can make is maybe instead of maybe the 2 10s need to be tucked in more defensively, or you kind of you bring the sort of striker, you play with like two strikers, and then you play with 1 10 in behind, so you have three in midfield. Then the midfield is a position where we certainly do need to bring one position. That's a position we have to bring in. As of now, I think what I would go with, I think Kobbie Mainoo has to get a spot in that pivot. I think with Cunha being injured, you have to move Bruno further forward as well. And I think for the next game, especially against Chelsea's big game coming up, you have to bring someone in that midfield. Talks about even Ruben Amorim, like the players have come in frustrated. He's had effectively 3 more games to save his United career. United are secretly looking to sack him during the October break. I think if you look at Ruben Amorim's future, listen, it's on the ropes, it's on ice, as people would say. And that is right, because the performances haven't been good enough. And not even that, the results haven't been good enough. I think you look at Ruben Amorim, he said he's going to do everything he can to change Manchester United. Ultimately, words are not enough. We need to see actions. And I think defensively, yes, we've had mistakes. And against City was probably one of the worst I've seen the defence play as a collective in recent times. I think the defence is all right. I think you can see, I want to see more from Dorgu, if I'm being honest, in terms of quality-wise. Like, he's getting in the positions, it's just his end product's not there. But I think the midfield is a huge problem. And as I said, when you play two in there, they have to be dynamic. They have to be like elite, like Kante-level engines. Like, they have to be all over the pitch. And I just think Bruno, with the age that he's at, and it's just not his natural position, it is a problem. I think Casemiro, 6 years ago, probably the best player in, will be one of the best players at covering ground and getting around the pitch. But again, but not 6 years ago. He's 32 now, I think, or 33. Yes, he's fit and he's keeping himself fit and to be available, but he's just not good enough long term. I think another player, Ugarte, not good enough again. For me, you can't have Ugarte as your main priority 6. I think Kobbie as well. I think someone who could do a good job in that midfield, but not as a number 6. We have to bring in a player, and who that is, we don't know yet. Whether that is Belabor, whether that's Wharton, whether that's someone else. I think you have to, the biggest thing is, and I want Bruno in the team, but Bruno is not a midfield, well, not a player for me who can play in that midfield too. I think we've kind of seen the last of that. He probably, for me anyway, I think he will continue to play there, but I just think it's a huge problem. And yes, in some games it probably works, maybe. But for me personally, there's no easy game in the Premier League, and especially in a big game against City, you trusted Bruno in there. And this is not the first time. Listen, I remember Tottenham, I think it was last year when we had all those injuries, and we played with Casemiro and Bruno, and I think it was Xerxes in the 10. And Bruno was just getting, like, there was so much space in that midfield. We've seen it this season. We've seen it in pre-season. Like, we've seen it time and time again. And the signs were there for Manchester United to go out and get a midfielder, go fix that position. But we just decided against it. And we went for a keeper, see how that plans out in the future. But the warning signs have been there. And as I said, there are massive problems in that midfield. And I think they're problems that are definitely solvable. But I think Amorim does need to make a few tweaks to the midfield. As I said, maybe packing it with an extra player in there, or having maybe like one of your centre-backs just drop into midfield, or something like that. But the midfield is something that's getting overrun, and I think Chelsea will look at that City game and look to kind of overload that midfield. We know they have quality players in there, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, Cole Palmer. They can get Neto. Obviously, like, they've got some good players who can kind of get into those positions and pack that midfield and cause problems to United. So we need to sort out that midfield. Let me know your thoughts of what should happen. And yeah, thank you for watching. Peace.